As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History. Proudly sponsored by American Family Insurance.
As we celebrate America's 250th birthday this summer, we're also sharing our We the People series, the people, places, and things of the past that have shaped our country into what it is today, and that includes very important movies, Charlie.
Yes, this one on this day, August 10th, back in 1939, The Wizard of Oz premiered in Green Bay. The movie starred Judy Garland as Dorothy. The movie wouldn't get a mass release in theaters until about 2 weeks later. The story featured Kansas farm girl Dorothy being transferred to Munchkinland after her house was caught in a tornado. The movie was not a financial success at the time of its release. The big budget production, which included about 600 actors and nearly 1,000 costumes, cost $2.8 million to make, but the movie only brought in about $3 million at the box office. Television is what transformed the movie into an American classic. The Wizard of Oz aired on national TV for the first time in November of 1956. The movie would then be shown once a year on TV starting in 1959 and would do so until 1991. Watching the annual screenings became a tradition for many families. The movie was based on the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was released in 1900. There are 14 books in the original Oz series that were written by L. Frank Baum. The final book was published in 1920, a year after his death. 19 additional Oz books were released by a different author. That's This Day in History for August 10th.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a discrepancy because Oconomowoc typically claims to be the birthplace, but it seemed like that year there was a few screenings, really this whole week, years ago, of Wizard of Oz at different theaters here and there, and so they were just trying to get a sense of what people thought of the movie before its mass release, but I think Oconomowoc would differ with our This Day in History today.
I believe in today's dollars, Wizard of Oz is right up there at the top. If you convert all that money into today's dollars for the biggest box office receipts. And again, a lot of it came from TV.
Yeah, it's because they polled the people here in Wisconsin, right? Before they released it. All right, Charlie, thank you.